WBBM-Tv, Channel 2, Chicago.
Rock Hudson stars tonight at 10:30.
This is the Sunday News with Michelle Clark, Harry Porterfield, Janet Langhart, Bruce Roberts, and Don Ramsell. Good evening. I'm Bob Wallace. Here's the news.
TV2 Chicago. From the newsroom, the TV2 News at 10, with Bob Wallace and the TV2 News team. Bruce Roberts with sports. And tonight, reports of new problems with the fragile peace in the Middle East.
Bill Curtis is still out with a bad case of laryngitis. We hope he'll be back Monday. In the meantime, here's the news.
This is TV2 Chicago. Live from our newsroom in Chicago, this is TV2 News at 6, with Bob Wallace and the TV2 News team, John Coughlin and the weather, and the second part of Bob Faw's series on coal mining in Illinois.
Good evening. Bill Curtis is still on vacation, that lucky fella. He is in Florida tonight.
From our newsroom in Chicago, this is Channel 2 News with Bill Curtis, Walter Jacobson, and the Channel 2 News team.
Good evening. Bill is on special assignment tonight. He'll be back tomorrow.
WBBM-TV, Chicago. This is Channel 2 News with Bill Curtis, Walter Jacobson, and the Channel 2 News team. John Coughlin with the weather, Johnny Morris on sports.
Good evening. Most of our newscast devoted to what happened in Springfield.
WBBM-TV, Channel 2, Chicago.
This is Channel 2 News with Bill Curtis, Walter Jacobson, and the Channel 2 News team. Tom Alderman with the weather and Johnny Morris on sports.
Good evening. President Ford says his conscience is clear. He's never used political contributions for personal benefit.
WBBM-TV, Channel 2, Chicago. This is the Sunday edition of Channel 2 News with Harry Porterfield, the Channel 2 News team, and Bruce Roberts on sports.
Good evening. A Wentworth District patrolman is in police custody tonight.
WBBM-TV, Channel 2, Chicago.
This is Channel 2 News with Bill Curtis, Walter Jacobson, and the Channel 2 News team. John Coughlin with the weather, Johnny Morris on sports.
Good evening. We are used to violence in Chicago.
Gary Cochran, Bruce Roberts, and Bill Whitelaw with the weekend edition of Channel 2 News.
Good evening. I'm Steve Shepard for Gary Cochran.
TV, Channel 2, Chicago.
Bill Curtis, Harry Porterfield, John Coughlin, Johnny Morris, and Walter Jacobson's perspective on the Channel 2 News at 6.
Good evening. The almost unspeakable horror that is Jonestown, Guyana is even more horrible tonight.
WBBM-TV, Channel 2, Chicago.
Harry Porterfield, Bruce Roberts, Irene Rodriguez with the weekend edition of Channel 2 News.
Bill Curtis, Mort Krim, John Coughlin, Johnny Morris, and Walter Jacobson's perspective on the Channel 2 News at 6.
Good evening. Massive cut.
WBBM-TV, Channel 2, Chicago.
Bill Curtis, Walter Jacobson, John Coughlin, Johnny Morris with Chicago's #1 news. Channel 2, the 10 o'clock news.
WBBM-TV, Channel 2, Chicago.
Bill Curtis, Walter Jacobson, John Coughlin, Johnny Morris, with Chicago's #1 news. Channel 2, the 10 o'clock news.
Good evening. The story of that tragic Tuesday night fire in which 9 people were killed on the city's south side took on yet another dimension tonight.
WBBM-TV, Channel 2, Chicago.
John Drummond, Kerry Cochran, Harry Volkman, and Bruce Roberts, Channel 2, the 10 o'clock news.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Channel 2, Chicago.
Walter Jacobson, Harry Volkman, Johnny Morris, and Susan Anderson. With the Channel 2 News at 5. Bill Curtis, Harry Porterfield, John Coughlin, Johnny Morris, and Walter Jacobson's Perspective. With the Channel 2 News at 6.
Channel 2, Chicago.
Bill Curtis, Harry Porterfield, John Coughlin, Johnny Morris, and Walter Jacobson's Perspective. With the Channel 2 News at 6.
Some 30 minutes ago.
Channel 2, WBBM-Tv, Chicago. Walter Jacobson, Don Craig, John Coughlin, and Johnny Morris with Chicago's #1 news. Channel 2, the 10 o'clock news.
Good evening.
Channel 2, WBBM-TV, Chicago. Walter Jacobson, Don Craig, Harry Volkman, and Johnny Morris with Chicago's #1 news. Channel 2, the 10 o'clock news.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Don and Walter have the night off. Carol Krause and I are sitting in.
#1 news. Channel 2, the 10 o'clock news.
Good evening. Walter's off tonight and Terry Anzer is filling in.
WBBM-TV, Channel 2, Chicago.
Mike Parker, Susan Anderson, John Coughlin, and Kevin Lynn. The Channel 2 Weekend News.
Good evening. Carol Krause is sitting in for Susan.
Channel 2, WBBM-TV, Chicago.
Mike Parker, Susan Anderson, John Coughlin, and Howard Sudbury. The Channel 2 Weekend News. Channel 2, WBBM-TV, Chicago. Walter Jacobson, Don Craig, John Coughlin, and Johnny Morris with Chicago's #1 news. Channel 2, the 10 o'clock news.
The champagne is flowing freely tonight.
Channel 2, WBBM-TV, Chicago. Don Craig, Harry Porterfield, John Coughlin's weather, and Johnny Morris sports. This is the Channel 2 News at 6.
Good evening. Arlington Park, the premier track in
WBBM-TV, Chicago. Bill Curtis, Don Craig, John Coughlin's weather, and Johnny Morris sports. This is the Channel 2 News at 6.
Good evening. A Chicago-based commodities firm is being charged with fraud tonight.
Mike Parker, Susan Anderson, Harry Volkman's weather, and Howard Sudbury's sports. This is the Channel 2 Weekend News.
It's a thick gray.
WBBM Television, sharing the spirit of Chicago.
From Chicago's news team, this is Channel 2's First Edition.
How might you put good evening, or good afternoon, I should say. It is just 4:30. A lot.
Channel 2, sharing the spirit of Chicago.
From Chicago's news team, this is the Channel 2 Weekend News.
Good evening. Federal aviation investigators tonight are...
WBBM Television, sharing the spirit of Chicago.
From Chicago's news team, this is the Channel 2 News at 6. Here goes.
WBBM Television, sharing the spirit of Chicago.
From Chicago's news team, this is the Channel 2 News at 6.
Good evening.
WBBM Television, sharing the spirit of Chicago.
From Chicago's news team, this is Channel 2, the 10 o'clock news.
Lee Hart emerges from seclusion.
WBBM Television, sharing the spirit of Chicago.
From Chicago's news team, this is Channel 2, the 10 o'clock news.
Good evening.
Channel 2, WBBM Television. Live from Chicago's afternoon news team. This is First Edition. Channel 2, WBBM Television, Chicago.
From Chicago's news team, live, the 10 o'clock news.
Channel 2, WBBM Television, Chicago.
From Chicago's news team, live, the 10 o'clock news.
Good evening. Bill Head.
Channel 2, WBBM Television, Chicago.
From Chicago's news team, live, the 10 o'clock news.
A visit by the member of the Kennedy family, a giant party for thousands, wild new charges, and a bizarre political fistfight. Good evening.
Channel 2, WBBM Television, Chicago. Live from Chicago's afternoon news team. This is First Edition.
Good afternoon, I'm Lester Holt.
And I'm Adele Arakawa.
Channel 2, WBBM Television, Chicago. Live from Chicago's news team. This is the 5 o'clock news.
5 o'clock, we continue our live team coverage. Cosmic Connie, Brenda.
Cosmic Connie, Bill. That's it for the 5 o'clock news. We'll be back at 10 with an update on the flood cleanup. The news continues now with the 5:30 report.
And good evening. I'm Adele Arakawa.
And I'm Walter Jacobson, and our top story of the night is the very latest on the story that we've been reporting already all after.
Channel 2, WBBM Television, Chicago. Live from Chicago's news team. This is the 10 o'clock news.
Good evening, I'm Bill Curtis.
And I'm Linda McLennan.
We have been through it all tonight.
WBBM-TV, Chicago. Now, Lester Holt, Linda McLennan, Harry Folkman with AccuWeather, Corey McFerrin on sports, and the Channel 2 news team. This is Channel 2 News at 4:30.
Our top story at 4:30, a stalker story.
WBBM-TV, Chicago. Now, Bill Curtis, Linda McLennan, Steve Baskerville with AccuWeather, Johnny Morris on sports, and the Channel 2 news team. This is Channel 2 News at 10.
Good evening, our top story.
Live from WBBM-TV, Chicago. Holt, McLennan, McFerrin, Folkman. This is Channel 2 News at 4:30. Live from WBBM-TV, Chicago. This is Channel 2 News at 4:30.
They left their daughters home alone while they went on vacation, and now...
Live from WBBM-TV, Chicago. This is Channel 2 News at 6.
After a week in the headlines, 2 nights behind.
Live from WBBM-TV Chicago, Curtis, McLennan, McFerrin, Baskerville. This is Channel 2 News.
Good evening. Bill is off tonight and Lester Holt is sitting in.
WBBM-TV Chicago. This is Channel 2 News at 4:30.
The crash
From WBBM-TV Chicago, this is Channel 2 News at 5:30.
WBBM-TV Chicago. This is Channel 2 News at 6.
A daring and dramatic...
You're watching Channel 2 News at 6 with Bill Curtis, Joan Lovett, Steve Baskerville with weather, and Corey McFerrin on sports.
From WBBM-TV Chicago, this is Channel 2 News at 10.
Good evening. I'm Penny Daniels in for Linda McLennan.
And I'm Bill Curtis. Our top story tonight, a murder mystery in...
You're watching Channel 2 News at 10 with Bill Curtis, Linda McLennan, Steve Baskerville with weather, and Corey McFerrin on sports. From WBBM-TV Chicago, this is Channel 2 News at 10.
A spectacular ending tonight to a search for a...
Live from WBBM-TV Chicago. This is Channel 2 News this morning.
And a good morning to you. Today is Wednesday, August 14th. The look outside shows us a pretty...
From WBBM-TV. This is Chicago's news. 2 News at noon.
Good afternoon. I'm Joan Lovett.
And I'm Lisa Kim. Janet Shamlian is off today.
From WBBM-TV. This is Chicago's news. 2 News at 6.
The sun, the source of life.
From WBBM-TV. This is Chicago's news. 2 News at 10.
An incredible...
Live from Channel 2 News, the Illinois primary, Campaign 96.
Good evening. I'm Linda McLennan.
And I'm Lester Holt. A good evening to you.
From WBBM-TV. This is Chicago's news. 2 News at 10.
Tonight, an inspirational story from Chicago touches the lives of thousands of people all across the country. Good evening. I'm Linda McLennan.
And I'm Bill Curtis. It is the story of the...
From WBBM-TV. This is Chicago's news. 2 News at 10.
In the face of death, she showed courage and determination.
This is News 2 Chicago. You're watching News 2 Chicago.
Good afternoon, and thanks for choosing News 2 Chicago. I'm Lester Holt.
You're watching News 2 Chicago with Lester Holt, Linda McLennan, Steve Baskerville, and Tim Weigel. This is News 2 Chicago.
This is the 4:30 news on CBS 2 Chicago.
Cabinet members, the recount fatigue draws out.
This is the 5 o'clock news on CBS 2 Chicago.
The war of words is continuing today over the recount of Florida ballots.
Both presidential candidates and...
This is the 6 o'clock news on CBS 2 Chicago.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us.
This is the 10 o'clock news, reported by Carol Marie.
Good evening.
This is CBS 2 Chicago. This is the 10 o'clock news, reported by Carol Marie.
Good evening. Her name...
Brushes with the law and the media. I don't mean to give us all a pass there.
You don't deserve one. No.
The news at 10 with Tracy Townsend, David Curley, Steve Baskerville, weather, and Tim Weigel, sports. This is CBS 2 Chicago.
The city of Chicago.
You're watching the news on CBS 2.
You're watching the news on CBS 2.
You're watching the CBS 2 News at 11 with Marianne Childers, Michael Ayala, and Monty Webb. Now CBS 2 works for you. You're watching the news on CBS 2.
The final.
You're watching CBS 2 News at 10 with Antonio Mora, Tracy Townsend, Steve Baskerville weather, and Mike Adamley sports. Now, CBS 2 works for you. You're watching the news on CBS 2 with John Davis, Cynthia Santana, Martina Brown weather, and Howard Sudbury sports. CBS 2 works for you.
You're watching the news on CBS 2 with Randy Salerno, Ed Curran with weather, Bill Zwecker on entertainment, Susan Carlson traffic, and Chris Habermel live from Chopper 2. This is CBS 2 News at 5.
Welcome back at 5:15.
You're watching the news on CBS 2 with Marianne Childers, Derek Blakely, Jim Tillman with weather, and Mike Adamley on sports. This is CBS 2 News at 4.
You're watching the news on CBS 2 with Antonio Mora, Marianne Childers, and Jim Tillman with weather. This is CBS 2 News at 4:30.
Now, the news on CBS 2.
The search is on for a murder suspect. He's accused of killing his ex-girlfriend.
Now, the news on CBS 2.
You're watching the news on CBS 2 with Diane Burns, Antonio Mora, Steve Baskerville with weather, and Mike Adamley on sports. This is CBS 2 News at 5.
It's right now.
Live from CBS 2, Diane Burns, Antonio Mora, Steve Baskerville with weather, and Mike Adamley on sports. This is CBS 2 News at 6.
A political storm is brewing in City Hall today.
Live from CBS 2, Diane Burns, Antonio Mora, Steve Baskerville with weather, and Mike Adamley on sports. This is CBS 2 News at 6.
You're watching the news on CBS 2 with Antonio Mora, Tracy Townsend, Steve Baskerville with weather, and Mike Adamley on sports. This is CBS 2 News at 10.
You're watching the news on CBS 2 with Antonio Mora, Diane Burns, Steve Baskerville with weather, and Mark Malone on sports. This is CBS 2 News at 10.
Now, the news on CBS 2.
Tonight, as a memorial grows for the victims of a deadly porch collapse.
Now, the news on CBS 2.
Tonight, the search for a serial rapist. 7 attacks are linked to the same man, putting some Chicago women on edge.
This is CBS 2 Morning News. Presents as Randy Salerno, meteorologist Ed Curran, Susan Carlson, and Bill Zwecker. CBS 2 News, Chicago's fastest growing news station. This is CBS 2 News with Diane Burns, Antonio Mora, Steve Baskerville, and Mark Malone. CBS 2 News, Chicago's fastest growing news station. CBS 2 News starts right now. CBS 2 News starts right now. This is CBS 2 News with Diane Burns, Antonio Mora, Steve Baskerville, and Mark Malone. CBS 2 News, Chicago's fastest growing news station. CBS starts right now. CBS 2 News 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 starts right now. This is CBS 2 News with Diane Burns, Antonio Mora, meteorologist Steve Baskerville, and Mark Malone. CBS 2 News, National Emmy Award winner for news coverage. CBS 2 News starts right now.
Anyway, it's time the Bears say goodbye to Hallis Hall and hello to Miami.
Now, from the CBS 2 Broadcast Center, in the heart of Chicago, this is the news on CBS 2 HD.
It was obvious to me something hit us.
This is CBS 2 News at 4:30. Right. This is CBS 2 News at 7.
Good.
This is CBS 2 News at 11. This is CBS 2 News at 5. This is CBS 2 News at 6. Good evening. This is CBS 2 News at 10. This is CBS 2 News at 10.
It has been 1 week since Officer Michael Bailey was gunned down in front of his home by the...
This is CBS 2 News at 5.
Good evening, I'm Jim Williams.
And I'm Mike Martinez. Thanks for joining us.
Do your job. Your job is to fund this government and make sure it works.
New at 6, things get especially tense in the Cook County Board chambers today. Good evening, I'm Rob Johnson. Good evening, I'm Rob Johnson. It's 10 o'clock. They know the risks, but lay it all on the line every day.
Live from the CBS 2 Broadcast Center in Chicago, this is CBS 2 News this morning.
And breaking.
Live from the CBS 2 Broadcast Center in Chicago, this is CBS 2 News at 10.
Good evening, thanks for joining.
This is CBS 2 News at 11.
News at 6 starts now.
Live from the CBS 2 Broadcast Center in Chicago, this is CBS 2 Morning News.
Right now at 6, Megan's real-time radar showing rain on and off.
Live from the CBS 2 Broadcast Center in Chicago, this is CBS 2 News at 11.
The family of a man killed by an off-duty Robbins police officer is speaking publicly for the first time today. Very good morning to you. I'm Lionel Moyes.
I'm Erin Kennedy. His death.
Live from the CBS 2 Broadcast Center in Chicago, this is CBS 2 News at 6.
Now at 6, President Barack Obama touching down at O'Hare Airport about 40 minutes ago.
Live from the CBS 2 Broadcast Center in Chicago, this is CBS 2 News at 10.
And every day I have learned from you. You made me a better president.
Live from the CBS 2 Broadcast Center in Chicago, this is CBS 2 News at 10.
Undocumented immigrants on alert. Border Patrol agents targeting cities like Chicago.
WBBM-Tv, Chicago.
Nobody does it better than Channel 2. Bill Curtis, Walter Jacobson, and a hard-hitting, award-winning staff of reporters doing what they do better than anyone else. Chicago. Channel 2 News at 5, 6, and 10. Nobody does it better.